All right, in this video, we are going to work problem 9.88 from our textbook. This is a study by M. Chen et al. Entitled Heat Stress Evaluation and Worker Fatigue in a Steel Plant. Assessed fatigue in steel plant workers due to heat stress. A random sample of 29 casting workers had a mean post-work heart rate of 78.3 beats per minute. At the 5% significance level, do the data provide sufficient evidence to conclude that the mean post-work heart rate for casting workers exceeds the normal resting heart rate of 72 beats per minute? Assume the population standard deviation of post-work heart rates for casting workers is 11.2 beats per minute. Okay, so step one, right, of performing the hypothesis test is to get the null and alternative hypothesis, right? So right around in here, they are asking, they start talking about that part. It says, at the 5% significance level, do the data provide sufficient evidence to conclude that the mean post-work heart rate for casting workers exceeds, right, is greater than the normal resting heart rate of 72 beats per minute? So that makes the alternative hypothesis, right, mu is greater than 72. If you haven't watched the video, right, for 9.1 about the different forms of the alternative hypothesis and the null hypothesis, you need to go watch that video before you work these problems here. Okay, so that makes this a right-tailed test. Next up, we need the level of significance, right, which is it's going to be just stated in the problem. It says at the 5% significance level, so that means that the level of significance, which is this symbol alpha here, is 0.05. That's 5% as a decimal. All right, next up, we need to calculate the test statistic, right? So that's going to be x bar, the sample mean, minus mu naught, which is this number up here, divided by sigma, which is the population standard deviation, divided by the square root of the sample size. So if I go back and look at the statement of the problem, it says somewhere in there, right, that a random sample of 29 casting workers had a mean post-work heart rate of 78.3 beats per minute. So that means that x bar, right, the sample mean was 78.3. All right, then mu naught is this number here, so that's minus 72. And then divide by sigma, which is the population standard deviation. They tell us that it is down here. It says the population standard deviation is 11.2, right, beats per minute. So 11.2. And then that's divided by the square root of the sample size. All right, so sample size, it says a random sample of 29 casting workers. So the sample size is 29. Okay. All right, so we need to go calculate that out. So 78.3 minus 72. This was, what was it, 11.2. And this is 29. Just double check that. Okay, it looks good. And so that is going to be 3.03 to 2 decimal places. All right. Next up, we want to calculate our p-value. All right, so this is a right-tailed test, right? So the p-value is the area, right, that is to the right of 3.03, right, under the standard normal curve right here. So what we would do is go to the table and look up 3.03. Nope, it's this column right here. 3.03. So that is 0.9988. Okay, so that's this area over here, right? Because that's what table 2 gives you, is the area to the left of whatever z-score that you look up, right? But what we want is this area here. So what we would do is to take and subtract that number from 1, right? Because the total area underneath the entire standard normal curve is 1. All right, so that comes up to be 0.0012. Okay, so that's our p-value. Next up, right, we want to compare the p-value 0.0012. We want to compare that to the level of significance, which is 0.05. Okay. All right, so we look and see, okay, which one of these is bigger? Well, the level of significance is bigger, right? So the p-value is less than alpha, so we are going to reject the null hypothesis, right? Because the p-value is less than the level of significance. All right, and then the final step is to state your conclusions, right, or interpret the results. So remember, that's going to be one of these statements, one way or the other, okay? And in this case, we rejected the null hypothesis, right? So the conclusion is that the data do provide sufficient evidence, right? So the data provide sufficient evidence to support and then the alternative hypothesis, right? Okay, so the alternative hypothesis, right, is mu is greater than 72, right? So, but, right, on the test and on the quizzes, it's not going to be phrased like mu is greater than 72, right? You have to be able to translate that into words, right? Normal English, just like you would if you were doing this in a paper or something like this, or trying to explain it to other people in your own research, okay? And so that is to support that the mean post work heart rate exceeds 72 beats per minute. Okay. All right, and that is it for this problem.